So basically, it was a guy who was like obviously a podiatrist or a biomechanist or a fucking physio, but he was basically talking about the difference between sit to stand. So if you know what sit to stand is, it's physio talk for a pistol squat to a bench on one leg or potentially even two legs. But it's normally done in the context when I see it on one leg because it's normally like lifters or athletes or people who are like higher functioning. But as a squatting task to a physical barrier, sit down, stand up. Either you sit down to a bench or on two legs or one leg or a chair or whatever it is. It's a commonly used exercise in physio and rehab and that sort of thing because it's obviously something people can do pretty early in any process or pretty much at any physical capacity as long as they can have use of their legs or whatever. So anyway, he's talking about sitting into your heels as a common cue. So obviously that probably makes more sense in a squatting task. But then he was trying to say how it's related to a gait cycle and how sitting into the heel caused you to use the lower back more than kind of sitting into kind of midfoot. So I sat through and watched it, but basically there was a few things going on. There was one, this guy was, to me anyway, was trying to just muddy the waters, make things more complicated than it needed to be. You using your lower back in a squatting task is not a problem for a start because the lower back is a hip extensor. The glutes are hip extensor, the hamstrings are hip extensor, they're all hip extensors. Using your hip extensors to extend your hip isn't a problem. The next thing he was saying was that sitting into the heel wasn't a great cue because it didn't relate to a walking task. Well, there's two things there. The first thing is a walking task is propulsion. It's a gait cycle. There's horizontal force factors or active horizontal force factors there. People want to travel forward, so there needs to be some kind of ground reaction force in the opposite direction. So that necessitates horizontal force factors. Obviously, the size of those force factors will determine what you're doing. Like massive force factors, you're going to be sprinting quickly. Small force factors, you're going to be walking potentially very slowly. So, and whereas with the sit stand, you're basically going, you're sitting down, you're standing up, so you're doing a closed chain kinetic knee flexion, hip flexion task to determine point. And then you have a closed kinetic chain, knee extension, extension task to the start. Now, obviously, and the next thing I was saying is, well, sitting into your heel is obviously a bad cue for that because you want the point of balance. And the point of balance, so if you imagine your foot's your point of contact, whether you're 1 foot or 2 feet, it's your point of contact with the floor, right? So your balance needs to be somewhere on that point of contact. Now, if you're imagining you had one of those kind of skateboards that sits on one wheel and you try and balance on it, they were fairly popular fucking 8 years ago or 9 years ago. There was a class on them. Fucking voodoo boards, I think they're called. Anyway, if you imagine you're on a voodoo board or you're on a board that has like a roller under it, do you think you're going to maintain balance if you put all your weight on one end of the board? Obviously fucking not. You're going to fall off. The foot's the same. If you have all of your weight on your heel or all of your weight on your toes, you're not balanced. By the very nature of balance, surface areas, center of masses, whatever the fuck, you need to be somewhere around the center. It doesn't have to be right on the center, but you need to be somewhere around the center. And the same in a sit to stand task or a squatting task. You need to have your center of mass somewhere within that footprint. If you're on the edges, the heels of the toes, you're probably going to fall. Or you're going to lose your balance. And you'll lose your balance and you'll fall. Because you're right at the extreme of your center of contact. You're probably reducing the surface area that you're able to kind of work with drastically by being off on the one point. So in a squatting task, it might start over the center, but as you sit down, it might come forward on the foot. And then as you stand, it might come back towards the center. But the point is it moves, and it's at neither extreme. So, again, it's a misnomer. Sitting on the heels of fucking shit. It's a shit coaching cue, whether you're squatting free, you're doing a pistol squat, you're doing a fucking equip squat, whatever it is. It's a shit cue because it pushes your balance back, which is not what you want to do. So there was a number of things. There was a number of things that were mixed together in this soup of overcomplicated nonsense where he's trying to put a put a point across, but he's talking about a whole lot of straw men. I think this is incredibly fucking common when fitness professionals, it's probably just charlatans in general communicating with people, but I think it's a really common thing where people, one, they try to overcomplicate shit by using big words and trying to relate big words to other big words, so people they kind of follow, but they don't really follow. Whereas if you have a bit of knowledge, like, I don't have any in-depth knowledge of biomechanics. I've done it to degree or postgraduate level, whatever, but I'm not a fucking biomechanist. And my last degree was fucking 15 years ago. So I have a bit of training in it, but I'm not a fucking biomechanist. My physiology, again, I've done a bit to a level, but again, it was fucking ages ago. So these are none of my strong suits. I'm not a biomechanist, I'm not a physiologist, I'm not a fucking pediatrician. I'm none of these things, but I have a bit of knowledge, but I also have a bit of fucking common sense and can use a bit of critical thinking and can tell that's bullshit. So it's more that you don't need fucking in-depth knowledge. You need to be able to problem solve, and you need to have a bit of fucking common sense to determine what you need to do in certain situations. I've probably overran this anyway. I'm not going to bother tagging the guy because it was like a sponsored post and he had 2 people in it, so if I tag him, he's probably going to fucking know who I am, and I can't really be fucked with this, and it's not really the point. The point was what I've just fucking talked about. Alright, well, hopefully you've enjoyed possibly the first and last high production value marksman of the bullshit, and I'll fucking see you later, boys.